You've probably seen the headline. Some report says, the average Canadian needs $1,700,000 sitting in savings before retirement even makes sense. It's the kind of number that's designed to make you feel behind, and for almost everyone watching this, it's not just discouraging, it's wrong. Here's the version of doing everything right that most people in their late 50s and early 60s are following. Max out the RRSP every year. Wait until 70 to start CPP, because everyone says the 42% bump is free money. On paper, that plan looks solid, but there's a $90,459 hole hiding inside it that almost nobody mentions out loud. If you defer CPP from 65 to 70 without a specific plan to cover those 5 years, you're not just picking up a bonus later. You're walking away from $90,459 in guaranteed government payments. In the meantime, money you were entitled to and simply won't get. That's not a rounding error. That's a real gap most people haven't priced into their plan. I've watched people do everything the textbook says for 40 years, then trip on this exact detail in the last 5, not because they made a bad decision, because nobody showed them the mechanism underneath it. Today we're breaking down what I call the RRSP bridge, the piece of the plan that decides whether needing less than you think is actually true for you, or just true on average. I'll show you how to fill that 65 to 70 gap without accidentally tripping the OAS clawback, which starts at $95,323 of income. If you're 55 or older and trying to make sense of these 2026 numbers for your own plan, stick around to the end. This is the math your bank statement won't show you. To actually get that 42% CPP bump, someone earning close to the maximum has to walk away from $90,459 in cash between the ages of 65 and 70. That's not a theoretical loss. That's $1,507.65 a month. For 60 months straight, that simply doesn't show up in your account while you wait. Most retirement guides tell you the same thing. Wait until 70. The number is bigger. Take the free money. What they don't show you is the line where your own savings have to step in and cover what the government isn't paying yet. But that 42% figure hides something important. It assumes you already know where the bridge money is coming from. Most people don't, not until this exact moment. Here's the shape of it in plain numbers. Max CPP at 65 in 2026 runs $1,507.65 a month. Multiply that by 60 months, and you get $90,459 in total payments you're choosing to skip. To actually come out ahead on that trade, most people need to live well past 82. That's not a bad bet, but it is a bet, and it only pays off if the 5 years in between are covered. This is where the trap sits, and it's not a trap set by anyone in particular. It's just how the incentive is built. If you don't already have close to $90,000 sitting somewhere liquid in an RRSP or a TFSA, to bridge those 5 years, you end up doing the opposite of the plan. You take CPP early at 60 instead, which locks in a permanent 36% cut, just so you have grocery money while you wait on a bonus that was supposed to make things better. The trade-off is simple once you say it out loud. Wait for the bigger check later, and you accept 5 years of thinner cash flow now. That's a fine deal if the 5 years are planned for. It's a rough one if they're not, because thin cash flow at 65 doesn't stay contained to your bank account. It bleeds into decisions about when you sell investments, how much risk you're carrying, and whether you touch principal you meant to leave alone for a decade. And even if you do have the savings to bridge the gap, pulling that money out of an RRSP too quickly creates a different problem. Every dollar you withdraw counts as income the same year you get it, and pull out enough of it fast enough, and you can find yourself facing a bigger tax bill on top of a clawback you didn't see coming. We'll get to exactly where that line sits in a minute, because it's not where most people think it is. Once you know the size of the gap, the fix isn't complicated. It just requires organizing money you probably already have. I call it the 3-bucket bridge, and it starts by refusing to treat your RRSP as one big pile of savings. Bucket 1 is the gap filler, and it only has one job, covering ages 60 through 70. Bucket 2 is the lifestyle floor, meant to carry you from 70 through 85, once CPP and OAS are both flowing in. Bucket 3 sits further out, covering 85 and beyond, for whatever health costs or legacy planning comes later. Splitting the same account into 3 purposes changes how you think about withdrawals, because you stop asking, how much do I have, and start asking, which bucket is this dollar supposed to come from? Here's what that looks like with real numbers. Say your target retirement income is $5,000 a month. OAS in the third quarter of 2026 pays $742.31 a month for someone between 65 and 74. Subtract that from your target, and you need $4,258 a month coming out of your RRSP bridge bucket until CPP finally starts. That's the number bucket 1 has to be built around, not a vague sense that there's enough in there somewhere. I used to tell everyone to wait until 70 no matter what. I was wrong about that, or at least wrong about saying it without a caveat. I've seen what it does to someone watching their RRSP balance shrink every single month for 5 years straight, waiting for a bonus that hasn't arrived yet. The stress of that countdown does more damage some weeks than the extra few $100s a month is worth once it finally shows up. The trade-off here matters too. Building bucket 1 properly usually means contributing less to bucket 2 or 3 in your final working years, which feels uncomfortable if you've spent decades being told that more in the RRSP is always better. But an RRSP with the wrong shape doesn't help you at 63 if all the money in it is earmarked for a decade you haven't reached yet. There's a second lever inside bucket 1 that's easy to miss. Every dollar you pull from an RRSP counts as taxable income the year you take it out. A TFSA withdrawal doesn't. If part of your bridge sits in a TFSA instead of only an RRSP, you get to choose, year by year, how much taxable income you actually show the government without changing how much cash lands in your checking account. There's one more wrinkle before this plan is complete. What happens if pulling $4,258 a month out of your RRSP pushes your total income for the year into a zone where the government starts clawing some of it back? That zone has a specific line in 2026, and it's closer than most people expect, especially once you add a spouse's income or a small workplace pension into the same household total. Back in 2008, plenty of people watched their RRSP balances drop close to 30% in a matter of months, and the instinct for a lot of them was to pull money out at the worst possible time, locking in the loss. That was the risk everyone understood back then. The risk sitting in front of you now is quieter, and it doesn't show up as a falling balance. It shows up as tax drag. Here's the number that matters most for anyone bridging their own retirement with RRSP withdrawals. In 2026, the OAS recovery tax threshold sits at $95,323 of net income. Above that line, the government takes back 15 cents of your OAS for every extra dollar you earn. It's not a cliff, it's a slope, but it's a steep one if you're not watching for it. The reason this hits people bridging a deferral harder than most is straightforward once you see it. OAS clawback is based on your income in a given year, not on your total savings or your net worth. A retiree who bridges by pulling a lot from an RRSP over 5 compressed years can look, on paper, like a much higher earner than they actually are on average, even though the money is really just their own savings coming back to them a little early. This matters right now because bridging a CPP deferral usually means pulling more out of an RRSP in your mid-60s than you would otherwise. If those withdrawals, combined with any other income, push you over $95,323, you're not just paying regular income tax on that money. You're also losing OAS you were counting on, and once you stack provincial tax on top, some people end up giving back 40 to 50 cents of every extra dollar they pulled out to fund the very gap we've been talking about. That's the part that catches people off guard, because it isn't about being reckless with money. It's about doing the sensible thing, bridging a CPP deferral with your own savings, and running into a second system that wasn't built with your specific timing in mind. I want to show you exactly how this plays out for a real couple, because the numbers only mean something once you see them attached to an actual decision. Robert and Linda came close to losing $4,000 of Linda's OAS in a single year, and neither of them saw it coming until the math was already done. Robert is 64, Linda is 62. Between them, they've built up $800,000 across their RRSPs, and by most measures, they feel like they've done everything right. Robert wants to hold off on CPP until 70, chasing that 42% bump we talked about earlier. To keep their lifestyle at $80,000 a year while Robert waits, they start pulling $70,000 annually out of Robert's RRSP. It works fine at first. Then Linda turns 65, her own OAS starts landing in their account, and their combined income for the year comes in at $105,000. That number crosses the $95,323 threshold by $9,677. At 15 cents on the dollar, the CRA claws back $1,451 of Linda's OAS that year alone. Neither of them had done anything wrong. They just hadn't lined up the timing of 3 separate income sources against one shared threshold. It's worth sitting with why this happened, because it's not really about Robert and Linda making a mistake. 3 separate income streams, Robert's RRSP withdrawals, Linda's OAS, and eventually CPP, all started landing in the same household in the same calendar year, and nobody had mapped out what that combination would add up to until the numbers were already locked in for the year. That's the part that trips up people who are otherwise careful with money. Once we saw where the problem was, the fix wasn't dramatic. We shifted more of that year's withdrawal away from Robert's RRSP and toward Linda's TFSA instead, since TFSA withdrawals don't count as income at all. That single change brought their net world income back down to roughly $94,000, just under the line. The amount landing in their checking account every month stayed exactly the same. The only thing that changed was which account the money came from and whether the government counted it as income. Linda kept every dollar of her OAS that year, and Robert still gets his full deferred CPP bump at 70. If you're doing something similar right now, pulling steadily from an RSP while a spouse's OAS or CPP starts to layer on top, it's worth asking a simple question. Have you actually added up what your combined income looks like in the year everything overlaps? Or are you assuming it will sort itself out? Robert and Linda have $800,000 between them, which gives them room to move money between accounts without much strain. Most couples reading their own statements don't have that kind of cushion, and the same overlap in timing can hit a much smaller nest egg just as hard, sometimes harder, because there's less room to shuffle money between an RRSP and a TFSA without running one of them dry early. That raises the obvious question. What does this look like for someone without anywhere near that much saved? Someone closer to the average CPP payment of around $925 a month instead of the maximum. There's a reason clawback numbers like this sting more than they probably should. Behavioral economists call it loss aversion. Losing $1,451 of OAS feels worse than gaining an extra $1,451. Somewhere else feels good, even though the dollar amount is identical. That's not a flaw in your character. It's just how most people's brains are wired. It's completely normal to feel like the system is rigged when you see a clawback like that up close. You worked for close to 40 years, you saved carefully, and the reward for doing that well is a bill you didn't expect. That reaction makes sense. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean the plan has failed. What tends to help is shifting the number you're actually watching. Most people fixate on the total size of their RRSP, the headline balance sitting on the statement. But a $1 million RRSP isn't really $1 million. Once the CRA takes its share on the way out, it behaves more like $700,000 in spendable after-tax money. Once you accept that the number on the statement was never fully yours to begin with, the idea that you need less than the $1,700,000 headline starts to make a lot more sense. This isn't about lowering your ambitions. It's about measuring the right thing. Cash flow after tax, not the size of the pile before anyone's taken their cut. Two people can retire with the exact same RRSP balance and end up with very different lives, purely because one of them planned around what actually lands in the Cheekwing account, and the other planned around the number on the yearly statement. If thinking about after-tax cash flow instead of the total balance is making more sense to you than the advice you've been getting elsewhere, that's worth paying attention to. It usually means you're finally looking at the number that actually determines your lifestyle instead of the one that just looks good on a statement. 3 habits actually move the needle on all of this, and none of them require guessing. Start by getting your actual CPP estimate directly from Service Canada, not the maximum figure of $1,507.65 that's quoted everywhere. Most people's real number sits well below the maximum, and your entire bridge calculation depends on the real one, not the headline one. Next, work out your own bridge number. Take your target monthly income, subtract your OAS payment, and multiply what's left by 60. That's roughly how much you need sitting somewhere liquid to cover the 5 years between 65 and 70 if you're planning to defer CPP. Finally, compare that bridge number to what's actually sitting in your TFSA today. If the gap is large, start shifting new contributions toward the TFSA instead of the RRSP for a while, so more of that bridge money comes out tax-free instead of adding to next year's taxable income. You don't need $1,700,000 to retire well in Canada, but you do need more than hope that it will work out. Build the RRSP bridge properly. Keep an eye on that $95,323 clawback line, and it's realistic to retire comfortably on well under what the big scary headline number claims you need. You've already done the hard part. Decades of contributions, decisions about spending less than you earned, all of that work is behind you. What's left now really is plumbing. Moving the right amount of money through the right account in the right year, so the system built around thresholds and clawbacks works for you instead of against you. If this kind of breakdown is useful, subscribe to Brian's Canadian Retirement Playbook. We'll keep working through the parts of the 2026 rules that most retirement advice glosses over, starting with a closer look at what your TFSA can actually do for you once CPP and OAS are both in the picture.